They say evil does not arrive with thunder. It arrives quietly, in small towns where everyone believes they know everyone else. Plainfield, Wisconsin was that kind of place. Fields stretched for miles, families trusted each other, and nothing truly terrible ever happened there. Until one winter morning, when a deputy entered a farmhouse and stepped into something that would scar the nation's imagination forever. The man who lived there looked ordinary. He mended fences, shoveled snow, and offered neighbors help with repairs. He was shy, polite, and a little strange, but harmless, or so everyone thought. His name was Edward Gein. What he kept hidden behind his walls would become the blueprint for every cinematic nightmare to follow. Please like this video and consider subscribing. Also, down in the comments, let me know what you would like me to cover next. Now let's get back to the horror. Ed Gein was born in 1906, the second son of George and Augusta Gein. From the beginning, his world was smaller than most. His mother, Augusta, ruled it completely. She preached that the world was wicked, that women were instruments of sin, that desire itself was a doorway to hell. She filled the farmhouse with scripture and fear, until even daylight felt heavy. His father drank to escape it. His brother argued against it, but Ed obeyed. He worshipped her, feared her, and absorbed every word. When George Gein died, the house grew quieter. When Henry Gein died a few years later in a suspicious fire, it became silent. And when Augusta finally passed in 1945, that silence became absolute. Ed boarded up her bedroom, sealed it off from dust, and left it preserved as a shrine. The rest of the house rotted around it. Her absence was a wound that never closed, and through it something dark began to breathe. Neighbors noticed odd habits. He spoke softly to himself, laughed at empty rooms, and drifted through town like a ghost wearing a man's body. He read pulp magazines filled with torture, anatomy, and the strange experiments of war. He scavenged junkyards for pieces of machinery and old medical tools. Somewhere between loneliness and madness, his curiosity turned toward the grave. Plainfield Cemetery sat only a few miles from his farm. Under moonlight, Ed would dig. He claimed later that he entered a trance, that he did not feel alive until the shovel hit wood. He searched for women who reminded him of his mother, women who could be rebuilt into her likeness. He took what he wanted and left the earth neatly tamped, so no one noticed the thefts for years. Inside his house, he began to craft. Lampshades stretched with human skin, skulls hollowed into bowls, masks made from faces carefully cut and dried, chairs upholstered with flesh. He tanned skin the way others cure leather. He shaped a corset from a woman's torso, a belt from human nipples, and, most disturbingly, a full woman suit that allowed him to step into another body. In his twisted mind, he was not defiling his mother's memory. He was resurrecting it. The fantasy could not contain him forever. On November 16, 1957, Plainfield awoke to news that Bernice Warden, the hardware store owner, had vanished. The floor of her shop was smeared with blood. The last receipt in the register showed a single sale, antifreeze, written to Ed Gein. Deputies drove to his farm expecting a simple arrest. What they found instead forced grown men to leave the building and vomit in the snow. The barn was cold, the smell metallic. Bernice Warden's body hung upside down from the rafters, the torso split open, drained like a deer after the hunt. Inside the farmhouse, the nightmare multiplied. Skulls lined shelves, human bones formed furniture. A heart sat in a paper bag near the stove. A box held the vulvas of 9 women. A mask made from a human face stared back from a corner. Every room contained evidence of obsession and ritual. When investigators opened the pantry, they found Mary Hogan's head in a brown paper sack. She had disappeared 3 years earlier. Ed admitted she was one of his victims, though he said little about how or why. In another room, they found the infamous suit of skin, complete with breasts, designed so he could step inside it like clothing. Each discovery deepened the sense that they had stepped out of reality and into something born from disease and grief. By the time the inventory ended, the farmhouse had become a legend in itself, a place where grief turned into creation, where imagination fused with rot, and where a son tried to rebuild the woman who had destroyed him. But the worst revelation was still to come. When word spread through Plainfield, disbelief came first, then dread. Reporters swarmed the frozen farmland. Flashbulbs lit the house like lightning as officers carried boxes of evidence to waiting trucks. People stood behind fences, whispering prayers and curses. The idea that a man they had known all their lives had lived among corpses, had warned the dead, was too much to accept. At the sheriff's office, Gein sat quietly. His face was calm, almost relieved. When asked why he had done it, he said he wanted to know what it felt like to have his mother near again. He spoke as if death were a misunderstanding that could be corrected with enough craft. The detectives who questioned him said his eyes did not match his words. They were blank, as though no emotion lived behind them. Psychiatrists called him schizophrenic, psychotic. The labels tried to cage something larger than diagnosis. He described visiting cemeteries by moonlight, claiming that sometimes he came to inside open graves without remembering how he got there. He told them he took only what he needed and always replaced the soil neatly. He seemed to think of it as borrowing, not stealing. The details of his projects filled endless reports. A human skull used as a soup bowl, a wastebasket wrapped in skin, chair seats stitched from flesh, masks made from 9 separate faces. The list read like the inventory of a nightmare museum. Every officer who entered the house later admitted the smell stayed with them for years. As investigators cataloged the horrors, the town's sense of safety collapsed. Plainfield had no serial killers, no organized crime, no reason for the world to notice it. Now its name was spoken with disbelief on every radio and newspaper in America. The Gein farm became an unwanted attraction. Curious travelers parked along the road hoping to glimpse evil made real. Then suddenly, the house was gone. In March 1958, only months after the arrest, a fire rose against the night sky. By morning, nothing remained but ash, foundation, and smoke. Officially, it was an accident from a trash fire. No one believed that. Locals said someone had done what the courts could not, erase the place where nightmares took root. When told about the blaze, Ed simply said, just as well. At trial, he faced the charge of first-degree murder for Bernice Worden. He entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. Doctors declared him unfit to stand trial, and he was sent to a hospital for the criminally insane. Years passed. He painted, read, and grew old behind locked doors. In 1968, physicians ruled that he was competent at last, and he stood before a judge in a quiet courtroom far from the chaos he had created. He was found guilty, then immediately judged not guilty by reason of insanity. He returned to the institution and remained there for the rest of his life. Inside those hospital walls, the world outside turned him into legend. Filmmakers studied the case and extracted pieces of him for fiction. Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. Each one carried fragments of Gein's shadow. His name became shorthand for the unimaginable. The crimes that had sickened a nation became the skeleton of modern horror. He died in 1984 from lung cancer, a frail old man who once dismantled the line between life and death. They buried him near his mother in Plainfield Cemetery. The grave marker was stolen, chipped apart by souvenir hunters, and later recovered by police. The earth above him is unmarked now, but people still find the spot. They leave coins, cigarettes, sometimes letters asking questions no one can answer. Time dulled nothing. The case still draws experts who debate whether he killed more than the 2 confirmed victims. Some point to unsolved disappearances near Plainfield and the methodical nature of his work. Others argue he was too withdrawn, too limited to sustain a wider spree. What no one disputes is that his crimes reshaped how the public imagines insanity. The story of Ed Gein is not just about murder. It is about obsession, loneliness, and a mind rotting in isolation. It is about a son who worshipped a mother so completely that he tried to rebuild her from the dead. It is about the way grief can ferment until it becomes something monstrous. Every photograph from that house captures the same thing. Ordinary objects twisted by intention. A chair that could belong in any farmhouse until you notice the stitching. A mask that looks almost human until you realize it once was. Each artifact blurs the border between humanity and horror. When people talk about haunted places, they usually mean ghosts. The Gein farmhouse had no ghosts. It did not need them. The evil there was entirely human. And that is what makes it unbearable. In Plainfield, the wind still crosses empty fields where the house once stood. Locals say the ground feels colder there, that animals avoid it. They are not sure whether they believe that or whether belief itself is the problem. What they do know is that a century later, the story refuses to die. The reason is simple. Ed Gein showed the world that the most terrifying monsters are not born in myths or distant nightmares. They grow quietly, inside the minds of lonely people, in houses that look like anyone else's. They mow lawns, they buy groceries, they smile politely. Then one night, the mask slips, and the truth stares back. He forced America to look into that reflection and see what might live beneath its own skin. That is why his name endures. That is why his story still crawls through pop culture and returns in every new generation of horror. The farmhouse is gone, the man is gone, but the fear remains because it was never really about him. It was about us and about what we become when love turns to worship, when isolation turns to madness, and when death becomes a mirror for the living. The nightmare of Plainfield did not end with the fire. It only changed shape. You can still feel it in the quiet of a small town after dark, in the creak of an old farmhouse floor, in the thought that maybe, just maybe, somewhere, another house like that still waits. Doors locked, curtains drawn, and silence hiding something that breathes. Down in the comments, let me know what you want me to cover next. Please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Thank you.